Okay, so today we're diving into some really fascinating sources, and they force us to ask this like fundamental question: what if the earliest form of Christianity wasn't really about doctrine, about rules? What if it was about transformation and this idea of the kingdom of God? What if it wasn't a place you went after you died, but a state of being, something
Yeah.
you could cultivate right now? So our mission in this deep dive is to explore these sources that claim, look, before the early church kind of hardened into institutions, the path of Christ was actually mystical, purely focused on this inner spiritual transformation. We're going to look at what certain groups, including followers of Grandmaster WaXhira and the Sacred Atlantean Brotherhood, what they believe was lost. And why some ancient texts seem to be popping up now, rising from the sand, maybe backing this up. Okay, let's get into it.
It's a really radical shift they're describing, isn't it? I mean, we're so used to thinking of faith as, well, beliefs you hold, or maybe a reward you get down the line. But this other path, this forgotten way, suggests the whole point was immediate, to realize this hidden reality within that completely changes the game.
Yeah.
It stops being just about history or obligation and becomes this very present psychological uh, inner journey.
And the sources we're really digging into today are analysis of the Gospel of Thomas, that rediscovered text might, and also these very unique, maybe even challenging teachings from Grandmaster WaXhira, who connects this inner knowledge stuff way back to, well, ancient, potentially forgotten histories.
Right. So let's start with that foundational claim. Christianity was meant to be deeply mystical. And the big loss, these sources argue, was that inner dimension of spiritual transformation.
Yeah, the engine room, basically.
Exactly. But they also point out quite quickly that this inner work, this transformative engine, it didn't just disappear from the planet when it supposedly got suppressed in the West, did it? No, precisely. If you zoom out, look at the bigger picture. This tradition of, let's call it internal work, it didn't vanish. It just found other homes. It flourished elsewhere. Think about the parallels, Kabbalah, right? The mystical stream within Judaism. It's all about mapping the soul's journey back to the divine source, very internal. Or Sufism within Islam, centered on that direct, often ecstatic experience of God's presence. Again, inner realization. And then, obviously, you look east. The Vedantic and Tantric schools, India, they never really lost that focus on inner realization. Dissolving the ego, meditation, specific practices, it's always been central. So the argument goes, while the West perhaps leaned more towards external things, ritual, belief systems, the inner work continued strongly in these other streams.
And now these sources suggest we're seeing texts rising again from the sands of history, almost like reminders for the rest.
Reminders of a spiritual inheritance it might have buried. That's the claim.
Which brings us, yeah, straight to what many people see as the key piece of evidence for this whole idea, the Gospel of Thomas. Because this text gives us a picture of Jesus, of the Master, that feels strikingly different from the one in the canonical Gospel.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Jesus and Thomas, he doesn't really give long sermons on morality or lay down detailed commandments in the same way. He speaks in these short, often puzzling sayings, logia, they call them riddles and revelations.
Riddles, okay.
Yeah, and they feel intensely personal, almost like Zen koans maybe, designed to kind of jolt you into immediate realization. It's not about telling you what to believe. It's instruction aimed right at your own consciousness. Very esoteric. And the passage that really sums it all up, the one everyone points to, is where Jesus says something like, the kingdom is inside you and it is outside you. When you come to know yourselves, you will realize it is you who are the sons of the living Father.
Wow.
See, the whole goal flips. It's not about seeking something out there. It's about discovering what's already inherent within.
And this is where it gets really interesting conceptually, because the source material we're looking at interprets this inner focus. They don't call it religion in our modern sense, like a club you join with rules. They call it remembrance.
Remembrance,
Yeah. The idea being, if the truth, the kingdom, is already inside you, then the spiritual path isn't about learning something brand new. It's about remembering who you actually were before the world, society, your own mind kind of taught you otherwise.
And the implication there is just huge, isn't it? It means you're not being saved from something like damnation. You're waking up to something, your own eternal nature. And this concept, remembrance, dissolving the false self to awaken the true self that becomes the thread connecting all those mystical traditions we mentioned earlier, it's the universal aim.
Right. So the ultimate goal, whether it's Thomas or Sufism or Kabbalah, it keeps coming back to this core idea to die to the false self and awaken to the eternal one. That's the work.
And that shared goal helps make sense of the different practices you see. Like, take the Sufi dervish, hurling. Why? To spin until the ego, the sense of separate self, just dissolves, to become nothing, to merge into the absolute. Or the Kabbalists studying the tree of life, it's not just abstract theory. It's a map for self-understanding, self-correction, charting a way to return to the divine source. And the yogi in deep meditation, samadhi, using a mantra like Aham Brahmasmi or I am that. What's the point? To dissolve that boundary between the I and the that, the self and the universe, all these methods, functionally they're doing the same thing. They're tools for breaking down the illusion of separation, tools for that remembrance.
Okay, but if this knowledge, this inner path, is universal, this ancient thing, it raises a big question, a potentially controversial one that our sources tackle directly. Did the early Christians invent this? Or were they tapping into something much, much older? And wait, how did these sources, especially the ones connected to WaXhira, actually justify that leap? Going from, say, first century Judea and the kingdom within, all the way back to legendary Atlantis. I mean, is that based on archaeology or is it more metaphorical?
That's a really crucial distinction to make, and the sources are generally quite clear on this. They aren't usually presenting this as, hard archaeological proof in the way a modern historian would demand.
Yeah.
It's presented more as a traditional claim, a mystical lineage.
Yeah.
The idea is that this core inner knowledge was known by the Egyptians, and yes, by the legendary Atlanteans before them.
Okay, a lineage of wisdom.
Exactly. A kind of perennial philosophy that just predates the specific religious forms we know today, like an underground river. And this brings us right into the specific teachings linked to Grandmaster WaXhira and the Sacred Atlantean Brotherhood. Because they take this very idea, ancient, forgotten wisdom, and connect it directly to Christ and to the Atlantis legend itself.
Right. They suggest looking at Christ not just as, a figure from history books 2,000 years ago, but as the eternal spark buried in every soul. And they give the spark a very specific, potent name, the slain master. What does that mean? What does slain master represent functionally?
Well, it's a powerful metaphor for the inner state, isn't it? The slain master isn't outside you. It is you, or rather the deepest part of you. It's that divine consciousness, the Christos potential, that gets buried or slain by, everyday life, by distractions, fears, the ego's demands, the noise of the material world.
The potential that's been
Sacrificed or just forgotten, covered over. So the whole spiritual task becomes the resurrection of that inner master, waking up that consciousness that's already there.
And that connects directly to their central metaphor, Atlantis. So in this teaching, Atlantis isn't just some, lost island with advanced tech. It's symbolic. It's the forgotten spiritual homeland within each of us.
Precisely. The story of Atlantis sinking beneath the waves becomes an analogy for what happens inside us. The ego takes over, the connection to the divine source is lost, and the true self sinks beneath the waves of worldly concerns, ignorance forgetting its real heritage. And if you look for echoes of this inner focus in other sacred texts, you find them everywhere. It seems totally consistent. The Upanishads in Hinduism say the self is hidden in the heart of all beings. Not out there somewhere, but in the heart.
Hidden in the heart.
The Zohar, the core text of Kabbalah, says, the soul is a lamp of the Lord, lit from above. It's already lit, you just need to uncover it, remember it. Even the Quran, read mystically, states that God is closer to you than your jugular vein.
Closer than your jugular vein.
Yeah. The message across the board seems to be,
Yeah.
the geography of the divine is internal.
Which leads us to the absolute crunch point, really. How do you actually get there? How do you access this inner homeland, this kingdom within? Because our sources are really emphatic about this. Mysticism is about direct experience. It's not something you just believe passively. You can't outsource it to a priest or a guru or even a sacred book. If the kingdom is within you, well, you have to be the one to go inside and find it.
Exactly. It demands active participation. And the necessary internal action is really about self-awareness, self-mastery. The seeker has to learn to stop identifying with everything that floats through the mind, the thoughts, the emotions, the body sensations. They have to practice becoming something else. The observer, the witness, the stillness behind all form.
The stillness behind it all.
That's the discipline. That's how you cultivate the awareness needed to perceive that inner kingdom that Thomas talks about. It takes practice.
And this group, the Sacred Atlantean Brotherhood, they actually offer a structured method for this, a kind of framework for the inner journey. They call it the Way of the Inner Voyage. And it uses these symbolic working tools. What are these tools? How do they supposedly work in practice?
Right, this is where it gets quite practical, using ancient symbols as navigational aids for consciousness. So think of the ocean. That represents the vast subconscious mind, deep, powerful, sometimes stormy, full of hidden currents.
Okay, the subconscious.
The ship is your conscious mind, your focused intellect. It's the vehicle you use to navigate that ocean, and you need to steer it carefully, keep it steady. The wave symbolizes, say, a passing emotion or a distracting thought pattern, something temporary that rises up and threatens to overwhelm the ship to pull you off course.
Mm.
And then, the blazing star. That's the destination. That's the fixed point of truth, pure consciousness, the Christos spark itself. It's the guiding light that the ship your focused mind needs to keep oriented towards, navigating through the waves on the ocean.
So it's like a map.
Yeah, they describe it as charting a sacred map to truth. It takes these sometimes abstract spiritual ideas and turns them into, like, practical internal sailing directions.
It all seems to build towards this powerful claim that as long as mainstream Christianity focuses primarily, maybe even only, on history, the events, the dates, the doctrines, who said what when, and neglects the mystery, the direct inner transformation, the experience, it's fundamentally missing the core essence of the Christ it claims to follow.
The mystery is the method. The history is just the context, the setting. That seems to be the argument.
So we've followed this thread, this forgotten path from ancient texts like Thomas right up to these very specific modern esoteric groups and their methods. And the big takeaway from these sources seems to be that the Gospel of Thomas isn't really presenting a new gospel to replace the old ones. It's more like an echo of what was always true, a reminder maybe of an original blueprint for transformation that got sidelined.
And that final thought from Grandmaster WaXhira really brings it back to the personal level, doesn't it? Atlantis may have fallen, but its memory lives on in every breath, every heartbeat, and every sincere longing to return. It frames the entire spiritual path, according to these teachings, as fundamentally an act of remembering who you truly are, resurrecting that slain master within yourself.
So what does all this mean for you listening right now? Well, if the deepest truth, as these sources define it, is about remembrance rather than just, say, intellectual belief, then the real work isn't about piling up more facts or doctrines. It's about shifting your attention inwards. If you entertain the premise, even just for a moment, that your mystical inheritance is this ability to remember your own spiritual homeland, your own Atlantis within, then the practical path forward is simply to start cultivating that inner observer. To become the witness, using your focused mind, your ship, to navigate the often choppy waters of your own consciousness, guided by that inner star, that memory, that homeland. It's yours to rediscover, yours to resurrect.